Hello folks, what you see here in the video is the articulated arm I just finished fabricating for my overhead camera mount that will be mounted above my workbench. Right now I'm using a tripod that I have to reach around like this when I'm doing overhead or bench video work, which is, as you can imagine, quite inconvenient. So it's been on my mind for a while to go ahead and fabricate this this articulated arm that will mount from the wall above the workbench and will allow me to suspend the camera vertically over the working space, which is about right here where my hand is. I'll detail a few features here of the build. Keep in mind this was not intended as a budget or economy build. I did look at many versions of similar articulated arms that you would buy commercially. People have used the articulated lamp arms. Actually, I have one of those lamps over on my mill, or I'm sorry, over on my lathe. And none of those really appeal to me, so this is really an application-specific build. It is not intended as a budget build, so I want to be clear on that. I didn't attempt to save money. My interest is in building something that worked for my specific application the way I intended to use it. The mount here, which mounts to the wall, and it mounts like this to the wall over the bench, is simply 3/16 steel plate. I had a bar of 3/16 steel. I think it was 2 inches wide, so I just cut it to size. You can see here where I welded everything together and basically made this clamp that the first arm mounts into. And this does pivot. Let me see if I can make this work for you like that, so that I can swivel the arm over the bench in such a manner like this. The orange here you see is just a piece of slippery plastic. I cut this out of a plastic bottle and used two-phase tape to stick it to the inside of the support arms here to give it a little bit of a essentially a bearing surface. The bolts are nothing but 5/16 course. I started with 2.5 inch long and then cut them to size with nylock lock nuts so that they don't come loose. So I can set the tension with a nylock lock nut, and then I don't have to worry about it backing off on the tension. So all the joints have that arrangement. That is a 5/16 course bolt cut off to the appropriate length, and then a nylock lock nut. The arms are 3/4 inch aluminum. I used aluminum because it's lightweight. I didn't want any more mass than necessary being suspended. 3/4 inch steel channel would probably work fine, be a little bit heavier. Aluminum is a little bit more expensive, of course, and that was one of the few things I actually had to buy. This 3/16 steel I had in much of the other hardware I had, with the exception of 3/4 inch aluminum channel, the lock nuts, the stove bolts. These are stove bolts. I prefer the finished look, a little more refined look of the stove bolt versus a hex head. Either would work fine. And then I bought this knob to attach the camera, and we'll get into that a little bit more later. The joints, let me give you a close-up of the joints here. I have the stove bolt going through with a washer. Then on the inside I have two more washers that sandwich a nylon washer that looks like this, that I actually had. I think I bought these like 15 years ago from Eastwood. They're really designed to go under bolt heads when reassembling cars and such. And I haven't really used them much, so I've got a whole bunch of them, and these are just perfect to act as that friction disc in the middle. And then another washer here with the nylock lock nut. And again, I can adjust the tension so that it holds position for me. So all the joints are done the same way, with the exception of the main joint with the support arm off the bracket. There is no nylon washers used. I just have a washer on each side of the stow bolt head here and the nylock lock nut on this side. Other than that, the other 3 joints all use a similar arrangement. This arm will mount to this ledger board that will go up, as you can see here in the video right now, that will mount up against the wall, and these 2 studs will go through something like that, and then I'll tighten it down with nuts. These lag bolts go right into the studs. I did do some measuring, and it's right above the window, so there's a stud above, runs right above the window, that this actually will bolt into a vertical on this side and the horizontal stud over here on this side above the window. So this actually mounts into the studs above the window frame. And then this section here is where the camera will mount. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and mount it on the wall, and then come back and I'll show it as it's mounted and is intended to be used. One last point I didn't mention is this was all powder coated, a low gloss black. I powder coated it myself. In fact, I just did it a few hours ago, and it's plenty cool now. But everything was powder coated in my shop, and nice low gloss black, so it'll protect it. I'll go ahead and mount it, and then we'll come back and I'll show it in action. Before I show the mounting of the camera, everything in place, I thought I'd provide a little more detail on the camera mounting arm itself, like you see here. You can see a little bit of the detail in the washer arrangement, flat washers on each side of the plastic friction washer here, 5/16 coarse thread stow bolt with a nylock lock nut on the other side. But this is the end I really wanted to talk about. Again, this is just a 3/4 inch square aluminum. You can see I notched it so that the camera will fit in here, and we'll see that when it's mounted a bit more. Right now the camera is being used to take this video. So I had to do a little notching here. I did that on the mill, most of it on the mill. You can do it with a file and a hacksaw blade as well. It'd be almost as easy. I just happened to do it on the mill, and then squared off the corners of the file. 1/4 inch hole for the 1/4 inch bolt on this knob I picked up at the big box hardware store. This originally was quite a bit longer, so I had to cut it off to length, and then I epoxied the washer in place, like you can see right here, simply so I didn't have to screw around to losing that washer or having it misplaced. I then chucked it up in my 3-jaw chuck on my my lathe, and had to turn this diameter right here where my fingers are down slightly so it would fit in there like that. So it was a little bit too wide to go into this spacing here. Didn't take much to turn it, now it works just fine. So you see how it looks like that. So now we'll go ahead and put everything together, and including using the camera, I'll have to use my cell phone to take the final video that will show it in place. There you can see the camera mounted over the bench. You can see the shop lights hanging over my bench, and you can see how it's mounted to the wall right there. Using my handheld cell phone for this video, so forgive me if it's a little bit jerky. You can see the different perspectives there. So again, I can do all kinds of things in terms of articulation. If I want to get the camera back out of the way, if I want to move it side to side, like that. Now I can open the screen if I mount it correctly, I can open the screen, but typically I won't be doing that here. I will have a separate monitor, which I already have off to the side, to the left. So the cable for the monitor will come out, and I'll just attach it up and over and down to the separate video monitor so I can see what the camera sees. So my next step here will be to get a little bit of a video snippet of the camera and what it sees, so that you can see what that'll look like in the future. Okay, there's a bird's eye view. This is right here where my hand is about the center of my working space. Of course, I can zoom the camera if I want to and get a closer view like that. That's all the way out. This would be all the way in. There is all the way in. Of course, it's way too close for this kind of work, but that's probably a fairly typical view right there. If I want to move the camera a little bit, you can see how I can tilt it. If I want to get a little down, a little closer, I can do that. I can go side to side. Like that. Typically, I probably won't use that much, but I thought while I'm doing it, I might as well build in the functionality. But this typically will be right here about my working space. So I think it's going to work out really well. Obviously, I haven't used it yet for any benchtop videos. I'll probably use it for the upcoming video where I work on the assembly of the lower end of the little Yamaha. Probably use it for that. But right now, that's the plan. Here's some tools to give you a perspective. Pretty much the standard stuff. I hope this video was useful or of interest, if nothing else. Again, I know this is a application-specific build, but perhaps some of the decisions I made might help others as they go forward and look at attempting to do something similar. Any questions? Drop me a note. Otherwise, thanks for watching.